ID 58321. Variant Standard. Content: the Galactic Council had gathered on the grand space station that floated between two glittering star systems. It was an enormous place, filled with shimmering towers and wide observation decks that looked out onto the vast expanse of space. Creatures from all corners of the galaxy had arrived, each one carefully chosen to represent their home worlds. They moved through the corridors with a sense of quiet authority, their eyes always scanning, their bodies poised. Everyone knew why they had come. They had come to see the most feared creature alive, the ancient dragon that had once brought entire fleets to ruin. It was a creature of legends and nightmares, a being whose name alone sent shivers down the spines of the bravest warriors. And now, for the first time in decades, it would be observed under controlled conditions. Unknown this very same day, a human family had boarded the station. They had not come to witness the dragon. They had come because they had been invited for a diplomatic meeting, one of those formal gatherings that humans rarely participated in. The family was small. There was the father, careful and cautious, constantly checking schedules and making sure their papers were in order. The mother, gentle and watchful, carrying a small bag filled with essentials and snacks. And the little girl, no older than 7, with wide eyes that shone with curiosity and wonder. She was fascinated by the lights, the strange shapes of alien species, and the hum of energy that ran through the station. Nothing about the station frightened her. Nothing, that is, except the stories she had overheard about the dragon. And even before they reached the observation hall, the family could hear whispers. Delegates spoke in low tones, exchanging news and rumors about the dragon. Some said it had teeth as long as a human arm. Others said its scales could deflect laser beams. Some claimed it had destroyed entire planets in its rage. The little girl tilted her head, listening carefully. She did not understand most of the words, but she felt the tension in the air. She reached out to hold her mother's hand, and her mother squeezed hers gently, reassuring her without saying a word. And the observation hall was enormous. It had a central containment area, a reinforced chamber designed to hold the dragon securely. Its walls were thick, metallic, and glowing faintly with energy shields. Around it, platforms and catwalks stretched into the air, allowing the council members to watch from every angle. As the humans stepped closer, the little girl's eyes widened even more. She had never seen anything so large. Even the largest animals on Earth seemed tiny compared to the dragon. Its form was massive, muscular, and covered with dark, gleaming scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Its eyes were deep and intense, reflecting a wisdom and power that humans could hardly imagine. And delegates from other planets were silent, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. Some whispered to each other, wondering if this dragon could sense their thoughts. Others carefully adjusted their protective suits, just in case. The air was thick with tension. Everyone expected chaos. Everyone expected danger. But the little girl was calm. She moved slowly, her small hand brushing against the railing as she peered at the dragon. She could feel the heat radiating from it, even from a distance. She could hear the low rumble of its breathing, a sound that vibrated through the floor and into her bones. But she was not scared. Instead, she felt something else, something gentle and sad beneath the power and anger. And her father noticed her curiosity and bent down, speaking quietly. "Remember, it's dangerous. Stay back." But the little girl only nodded slightly. Her attention was fixed on the dragon. It seemed to be aware of them, shifting its massive head slightly and letting out a low, warning growl. Even from this distance, the sound was enough to make grown delegates flinch. Some murmured to each other that the containment shields might not hold if the creature became angry. The little girl, however, only leaned a little closer, her small fingers gripping the railing tightly. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet fascination. And the council members began to speak among themselves, debating protocols and contingencies. They were used to danger. They had faced countless threats, but nothing like this. This dragon was a living weapon of unimaginable strength. Every plan, every defense, every precaution they had prepared was being weighed carefully against the possibility of failure. And yet, the little girl, sitting on her father's arm to see better, whispered something almost to herself. "It looks lonely," she said. Her mother smiled softly, but did not correct her. She knew that children often had a way of seeing things adults could not, and technicians worked in the chamber, checking the energy shields and monitoring the dragon's behavior. The creature moved slowly, as if aware of its audience. Its claws scraped against the floor, leaving deep marks. Its tail lashed occasionally, sending sparks of energy that bounced harmlessly off the reinforced walls. The little girl's eyes followed every movement. She noticed how its scales seemed to glint differently under the lights, how its eyes occasionally softened, and how it seemed almost bored with the attention. No one else noticed these details, too focused on the potential danger. She leaned closer, trying to imagine what the creature might be thinking. She did not see a monster, only a giant creature that was tired, maybe misunderstood. And none that's passed like ours. The tension in the room built, but the little girl remained calm, asking quiet questions to herself and to her parents. "Do dragons get scared? Do they get lonely?" she asked in a voice that was soft but clear. Her father glanced at her nervously, unsure if she should speak, but the mother simply smiled. It was impossible to explain to her why this was dangerous. She would not understand the fear in the room. And yet, somehow, the presence of a small human child in the hall seemed to create a strange, subtle shift. Even the dragon seemed to notice her, its head tilting slightly, its glowing eyes following her movements with curiosity rather than anger. The council began preparing for the demonstration. They wanted to show the dragon's power safely. Delegates moved to higher platforms, adjusting observation equipment and energy shields. Cameras were positioned to record every angle. Orders were given in precise tones, echoing through the hall. A dragon shifted its weight, moving closer to the center of the chamber, and the low rumble of its breath filled the space. Some delegates whispered about their fear of making mistakes. Others thought about the battle strategies they had prepared for generations, suddenly feeling small and insignificant. The little girl, however, continued to watch silently, her mind filled with wonder rather than fear. And no one could predict what would happen next. The tension was like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap at any moment. Yet the presence of a human child, so small and innocent, created a strange calm. Delegates felt it, even if they did not understand why. They watched the dragon, they watched the girl, and they waited for something extraordinary to happen. And in that quiet moment, as the stars shone outside and the dragon's eyes glimmered in the artificial lights, the stage was set for an encounter that would stun the Galactic Council and challenge everything they thought they knew about fear, power, and the bond between beings of different worlds. ID 58322, Variant Standard. Content: the dragon's reputation preceded it, even within the walls of the massive observation hall. Whispers spread quickly among the delegates and technicians as they prepared for the demonstration. They spoke in low voices, repeating stories of the creature's past, each one more terrifying than the last. Some described entire fleets destroyed in an instant, cities burned to ash, and battlefields littered with the remnants of brave but defeated warriors. The legends painted it as unstoppable, a force of nature that no one had ever tamed. It's very Name carried fear, respect, and awe. And yet, the little girl, standing at the railing with her small fingers wrapped tightly around the cold metal, did not seem the least bit afraid. And she leaned forward slightly, trying to see every scale, every claw, every ripple of muscle beneath the dragon's dark, shining skin. Her curiosity was endless. She noticed things the others did not, the way its eyes darted to certain spots, the way it occasionally twitched its ears like appendages, the rhythm of its breathing, and even the slight sag of its massive shoulders that suggested exhaustion. While the council members focused on its power, she saw its weariness. While the delegates prepared for a potential disaster, she wondered if the creature felt alone. And her parents stood a few steps behind, tense and careful. The father continuously checked the schedule and the safety protocols, muttering under his breath, while the mother held the little girl's other hand and kept an eye on the bustling delegates. They were used to planning, to thinking ahead, but nothing could have prepared them for the atmosphere in this hall. Every second seemed stretched, every movement amplified by the tension in the air. And through it all, the little girl's wide, bright eyes never left the dragon. And technicians monitored the creature closely, watching the energy readings, heart rate, and muscular tension. Every flicker of its tail, every exhale, every movement of its claws was noted and logged. They spoke in technical terms, discussing containment fields, energy shields, and emergency protocols. The council members nodded, their expressions serious, but beneath the calm exterior, many felt a deep unease. They had studied dragons of this type, but nothing could fully prepare them for the raw intensity of this particular creature. And, in contrast to their anxiety, the little girl seemed to be absorbing everything with innocent fascination. She tilted her head and asked softly, "Do dragons get scared too?" And her mother whispered back, "They're very strong. But yes, even strong creatures can feel afraid." And the little girl nodded, her gaze fixed on the dragon. She did not see fear in its eyes, not the kind that humans recognized, but something else, something quieter. She sensed loneliness. She sensed that the dragon, despite its size and strength, might be tired of being feared, tired of being alone. It was a strange thought, and yet it made sense to her. She had often comforted small animals back home, and she wondered if somehow even a creature this massive might need a friend. And the council members began their formal briefing. They spoke of the dragon's history, its conquests, and its incredible abilities. They described its fire-breathing capacity, the hardness of its scales, its speed, and its intelligence. They discussed containment strategies, the design of the chamber, and the precautions in place for every possible scenario. Delegates nodded, some scribbling notes, others whispering to colleagues. Everyone was aware of the danger, and everyone understood the importance of the demonstration. And yet, in a corner of the hall, the little girl continued to watch, as if the historical facts and terrifying stories did not matter to her at all. And as the technicians made final adjustments, the dragon shifted slightly. Its head moved slowly, eyes narrowing and scanning the hall. Some delegates jumped slightly, but the little girl stayed perfectly still. She noticed how its nostrils flared, how the ridges on its scales moved with each breath, and how a faint hum of energy seemed to emanate from its massive body. It was mesmerizing. She leaned closer, her eyes wide, taking in every detail. There was a rhythm to its movement, a subtle pattern that no one else seemed to notice. And in that rhythm, she thought she detected something almost human, a feeling of being observed, of being understood, and of longing. And the technicians continued their work, ensuring that the containment field was stable and that the dragon could not escape or cause harm. They tested the shields, monitored energy flows, and adjusted sensors. The council members debated strategies, discussing how best to proceed with the demonstration. Some spoke in hushed tones about what would happen if the creature became angry. Others speculated about whether it might recognize the fear in the room. And all the while, the little girl asked more questions quietly, as if speaking to herself. Does it want to play? Does it get lonely? Maybe it just needs someone to care. And her parents exchanged worried glances. They had been raised with caution, with an understanding of human vulnerability in alien settings. But the little girl was different. She did not see only danger. She saw life, presence, and possibility. They were used to thinking about containment and defense, but she was thinking about connection. It was something the council and technicians had overlooked entirely, a perspective born of innocence and empathy rather than fear or calculation. The dragon moved again, this time slowly raising one massive claw and tapping it against the reinforced floor. Sparks flew where the claws met the metallic surface. A low rumble filled the hall, vibrating through the platforms and into the bodies of the council members. Some instinctively stepped back. The little girl, however, stayed rooted to the spot, staring directly at the dragon. She could feel the energy from its movement, a pulse that resonated like a heartbeat in the chamber. And for the first time, she whispered aloud, "It's not angry, it's just tired." And no one heard her, or if they did, they dismissed it as childish chatter. But she watched carefully as the dragon's breathing slowed slightly, and its eyes seemed to soften for a fleeting moment. She noticed that it occasionally glanced toward the corner where she stood, and she tilted her head in response, as if acknowledging it silently. Her intuition told her something extraordinary, that this creature, feared by millions, could sense her presence differently from the others. It was not reacting with aggression, nor with fear, was observing, curious, attentive, and perhaps, just perhaps, it recognized something familiar in her small, unguarded way of being. Minutes passed. The council finalized their instructions, and the technicians continued monitoring every subtle motion of the dragon. Discussions were ongoing about what demonstration to conduct, and cameras were positioned to capture every angle. Delegates whispered among themselves about what might happen if the dragon became provoked, if it broke containment, if it chose to act in ways no one expected. The little girl, however, was lost in quiet observation, her mind working through a puzzle she did not yet have words for. She noticed the gentle tilt of the dragon's head, the soft rumble in its throat, the occasional flicker of scales catching the light. She imagined the story behind each movement, the years of battles, the isolation, the immense weight of being feared by so many species. And her mother finally knelt beside her and whispered, "Be careful, sweetheart. This is dangerous." And the little girl nodded, but her eyes never left the dragon. She did not feel the same fear as the adults. Instead, she felt a strange empathy, a connection that defied explanation. And in that moment, the stage was set for something remarkable. The council had gathered to witness the power of a legendary beast, expecting chaos and awe. But the presence of a single, curious human child hinted at a possibility no one had considered, that perhaps even the deadliest of creatures could respond to innocence, kindness, and attention in ways that defied fear and expectation. ID 58323, Variant, Standard, Content. The little girl had never seen anything like the dragon up close. Even from a distance, she could feel the sheer size and power of the creature, but she also sensed something quieter beneath its terrifying exterior. Its eyes, though sharp and intelligent, carried a depth of emotion that none of the council members seemed to notice. While they whispered among themselves, discussing protocols, contingencies, and what-ifs, the girl felt drawn toward the dragon. She did not know why. She only knew she wanted to see it, to understand it, to connect with it in some way. And the dragon shifted again, this time raising its massive head slightly as it moved within the containment chamber. The low rumble of its breath echoed through the hall. Some of the delegates instinctively took a step back, whispering warnings and reassessing their safety measures. The technicians were busy monitoring the energy shields, making slight adjustments to ensure containment was secure. Everyone seemed tense, watching every subtle movement with anxious eyes. But the little girl, standing quietly beside her mother, felt no fear. She only felt curiosity, a gentle urge to reach out and understand. And for a moment, she imagined what it would be like to be inside the dragon's mind. She imagined how lonely it must feel, how heavy the burden of fear and power could be. Perhaps, she thought, it simply wanted someone to notice it for more than its strength and reputation. She whispered softly to herself, "You're not just scary. You're tired, aren't you?" And her parents glanced down at her, concerned. Her father muttered under his breath about how dangerous it was, about containment protocols, about not approaching too closely. Her mother held her hand gently, whispering reassurances, yet she did not scold her. She had learned that children often see things differently, sometimes noticing truths adults overlook. The little girl nodded at her mother, but her gaze remained fixed on the dragon. She was not afraid. She was attentive. She was patient. She waited and watched, learning the rhythm of its movements. Then the council members began finalizing their preparations for the demonstration. They moved to higher platforms, checking cameras and sensors, discussing what the dragon might do if it became agitated. Technicians tapped on consoles, adjusted energy shields, and monitored readings that showed the dragon's heartbeat, breathing, and muscular tension. Every flicker of its tail and every slight movement of its claws was noted carefully. Some delegates whispered about the danger of approaching, about how no one had ever tried to communicate with a dragon this massive. They spoke in measured tones, planning for worst-case scenarios, but none of them had considered the possibility that a simple human gesture, small and kind, might change everything. And meanwhile, the little girl leaned closer to the observation railing, her tiny hands gripping the metal tightly. She noticed the faint flare of heat from the dragon's nostrils, the subtle twitch of its ears-like structures, the way its massive tail occasionally thumped against the floor. Her gaze followed the creature's movements with careful attention, picking up details that adults overlooked. She noticed the slight droop of its wings, the subtle shift in its weight, and the way its eyes seemed to flicker toward her periodically. It was almost as if the dragon were aware of her presence in a different way that it noticed the council members or the technicians. There was a quiet recognition, a connection that did not need words. Then the little girl tilted her head and whispered, again, this time a little louder, "It's not angry at us. It's just curious, maybe." Her parents exchanged uneasy glances. Her father whispered warnings about being careful, but the little girl did not move. She felt a strange confidence in herself, a feeling that she could communicate in a way others could not. She did not understand fully why she felt this way, but it was a natural instinct. She simply wanted to reach out, to let the dragon know that she saw it not as a monster, but as a living being. The dragon's eyes, glowing faintly in the artificial lights, seemed to linger on her. It tilted its massive head, the movement, slow and deliberate, and studied her as carefully as she studied it. The low rumble in its throat changed slightly, softer this time, almost like a sigh. The delegates whispered nervously, noting the unusual change in its breathing pattern. Some whispered that the dragon might be calming down, but others warned that it could be a trap, a momentary trick before an unpredictable attack. Everyone was tense, but the little girl remained calm. She felt something shift in the atmosphere, a subtle change in the way the dragon held itself. It was no longer bracing for confrontation. It seemed to be observing, waiting, and perhaps, in its own way, acknowledging her presence. And minutes passed slowly. The council finalized their instructions, and the technicians kept a careful watch on every parameter. Cameras captured every angle, recording every slight movement, every twitch of the dragon's claws, every ripple in its dark, gleaming scales. Delegates whispered about how extraordinary it would be if the dragon responded peacefully, but most did not believe it was possible. They were prepared for chaos. They expected danger. And yet the little girl, standing quietly and observing with her wide, curious eyes, sensed something entirely different. She felt the dragon's attention like a gentle weight pressing against her awareness, a presence that was cautious, but not hostile. Anshi whispered softly again, almost as if speaking to a friend. "Do you want to talk? Or do you just want someone to see you?" The dragon's massive head shifted slightly, its nostrils flaring, and it let out a low, curious sound that vibrated through the reinforced floor. The council members noted the sound and murmured among themselves, but the little girl tilted her head and smiled faintly. She felt that the dragon was listening. She felt that it recognized something in her that others could not see. She did not need words to understand it. She only needed presence, patience, and a calm heart. And her parents were increasingly nervous. They whispered reminders to stay safe, to be careful, to not draw attention. But the little girl did not move. She felt an invisible thread connecting her to the dragon, a silent understanding that transcended fear, power, and species. She wondered what it must have felt like to be so feared, so powerful, yet so alone. She imagined the battles, the isolation, and the weight of being known only for destruction. And in that moment, she made a quiet decision to offer something different, a simple, gentle presence that said, "I see you. You are not alone." And the dragon shifted again, raising its massive head fully and letting out another low rumble. Its eyes glimmered with intelligence, curiosity, and perhaps something else in awareness that had never been recorded by any council member or technician. The little girl felt a thrill of understanding. She whispered softly, "I'm not afraid. You don't have to be either." And no one else heard her, or if they did, they dismissed it as a child speaking softly to herself. But the dragon's gaze remained on her. Its enormous head lowered slightly, bringing its glowing eyes level with her line of sight. A faint, almost imperceptible movement of its nostrils and mouth suggested that it was reacting not with aggression, but with cautious acknowledgement. The council members continued to prepare for the demonstration, but for the little girl, the demonstration had already begun. It was happening in silent gestures, in shared glances, and in the subtle language of presence that only beings unbound by fear could understand. As the minutes stretched, the little girl noticed every detail, the way the dragon's scales reflected the artificial light, the small movements of its claws, the faint sound of its breathing, and the way its massive wings rested lightly against the floor. She whispered again, gently, "You're not alone. I see you." And in that quiet, remarkable moment, the first true connection began to form between a human child and a legendary feared alien dragon. While the council prepared for fear and chaos, the little girl and the dragon were silently communicating in a way no one else could understand. It was a simple connection, built on attention, empathy, and presence, but it was powerful enough to hint that even the deadliest creatures could respond to gentle understanding. The stage was now set for something extraordinary, something that would challenge the council's expectations and reveal the true strength of innocence and human connection. ID 58,324. Variant Standard. Content. The little girl took a slow, careful step closer to the observation railing. Her small hands gripped the cold metal, and she leaned forward just enough to bring her face level with the dragon's enormous head. The air around her vibrated faintly with the dragon's low rumble, a sound that echoed through the hall and seemed to reach straight into her chest. Some of the council members noticed her movement and exchanged alarmed glances. They whispered quickly, reminding each other of the danger and debating whether someone should stop her. But her parents stayed behind, unsure whether to intervene or trust her instincts. The girl's eyes, wide and calm, never left the dragon's gaze. There was no fear in her expression, only curiosity, wonder, and something the council could not understand: empathy. And the dragon, enormous and imposing, had been observed countless times by experts, but it had never reacted this way to a human presence. Its head tilted slightly, the eyes narrowing in a way that suggested it was studying her, trying to understand her intentions. Its massive nostrils flared softly, and the rumble in its throat shifted to a gentler tone, as though it were listening rather than preparing to attack. For the first time, the creature's legendary ferocity seemed tempered, its awareness drawn to something other than fear or aggression. And the little girl, with her tiny frame and quiet presence, seemed to bring out a side of the dragon that no one had ever seen before. NC whispered softly, almost to herself, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." Her voice was calm and gentle, carrying a warmth that filled the space between them. She didn't know if the dragon could understand her words, but she felt that it could sense her intentions. The subtle change in the dragon's posture confirmed. It shifted slightly closer to the barrier, its massive head moving toward the spot where her hand rested on the metal railing. Sparks of energy from the containment shields flickered, faintly as if reacting to the creature's immense power. Delegates gasped quietly, some instinctively stepping back, unsure what would happen next. But the girl remained perfectly still, her small hand trembling slightly with anticipation, but her gaze fixed steadily on the dragon. For the first time in decades, the dragon allowed its attention to focus entirely on something other than the council's fear and scrutiny. Its massive eyes, glowing faintly under the artificial lights, seemed to soften. The little girl noticed the subtle relaxation in its muscles, the easing of tension in its claws and tail. She realized that the dragon was not being tamed with force, but rather it was responding to calm, gentle attention. Slowly, she raised her hand and pressed it lightly against the reinforced barrier, directly in front of the dragon's enormous snout. Her fingers barely made a mark, but the gesture carried with it the innocence and trust of a child, something the dragon could sense even through the protective shield. And the room fell silent. Technicians froze, their fingers hovering over control panels. Council members held their breath, expecting the dragon to lash out, to roar, to shatter containment. But nothing of the sort happened. Instead, the dragon leaned its massive head toward the spot where the little girl's hand rested, lowering itself in a deliberate, gentle movement. Its rumble softened further, vibrating in a calm, almost melodic pattern that filled the observation hall. Sparks from the containment shields flickered faintly, but the dragon remained still, focused entirely on the small human presence before it. It was a moment no one had anticipated. The legend of fear and destruction stood quietly, listening, observing, and responding to a gesture of kindness. And the little girl's heart pounded, not with fear, but with excitement and awe. She whispered softly again, "I just want to be your friend." She didn't know if the dragon understood the words, but she felt a shift in the atmosphere. The creature's eyes narrowed slightly, then relaxed, and a faint, gentle exhale passed through its massive nostrils. She sensed that it was responding, acknowledging her presence and her intentions. A connection was forming, delicate but undeniable, between the human child and the legendary beast, and her parents watched in stunned silence. They had come to a formal meeting, expecting protocol and diplomacy. Yet they witnessed something extraordinary unfolding before their eyes. The father's hand went instinctively to his daughter's shoulder, but he did not pull her back. Instead, he watched, recognizing that this was not fear, but understanding. Her mother's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Neither of them could fully explain what was happening, but they could feel it something extraordinary, bridging the gap between species, power, and legend. And the council members, on the other hand, were scrambling to comprehend the scene. Delegates whispered among themselves, questioning their assumptions about dragons and human capability. Scientists leaned forward to study energy readings, noting the subtle changes in the dragon's physiology. Every breath, every minor movement, every flicker of the eyes was being recorded and analyzed. None of the experts had anticipated that a child could elicit such a calm and attentive response from the creature. Every previous experiment, every containment test, every observation had suggested that the dragon would only respond to dominance, fear, or threat. But here, in the presence of innocence and trust, it was calm, almost peaceful. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The little girl kept her hand pressed gently against the barrier, watching the dragon's eyes as they shifted and focused. On her, she noticed tiny movements in its nostrils and a faint lift of its massive head as if it were sniffing her presence. The dragon's claws remained still, its tail unthreatening, and its rumble had softened to a gentle, steady vibration. In that moment, the observation hall, usually tense and electric with fear, seemed to breathe slowly, in quiet harmony with the small human, almost like a lullaby. "You don't have to be afraid. I just want to see you." The dragon responded subtly, lowering its massive head a fraction closer, its nostrils brushing gently against the reinforced barrier. The little girl felt a thrill of connection that was almost tangible. She could sense the creature's attention, fully focused on her, an awareness that had never been directed at anyone else in this hall. The council members murmured in disbelief, some stepping back from the edge, others leaning forward with cameras ready, unsure whether to capture a miracle or brace for disaster. And for the first time, the dragon allowed its legendary power to be tempered by empathy rather than fear. The little girl's gentle presence, her calm voice, and her trust had reached through the barriers of steel, shields, and centuries of fear. It was a simple human gesture, yet it held weight greater than any strategy, any containment plan, or any council decree. It was pure connection, untainted by fear, power, or expectation. And as the moments passed, the little girl leaned a little closer, careful not to push too far, careful to respect the boundaries of a creature so immense. The dragon, in turn, lowered its massive head even more, bringing its eyes closer to her line of sight. Sparks flickered softly from the containment shields, harmless but illuminating the quiet majesty of the dragon's features. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, watching this extraordinary interaction unfold. What was supposed to be a demonstration of power and fear had become a demonstration of trust and understanding, all sparked by the courage and innocence of a small human child. And her parents exchanged amazed glances, their hearts racing with wonder. They had never seen anything like this. Her father whispered softly, She's connecting with it." "N.S.," her mother replied, her voice equally soft. "I think she really is." And the little girl smiled faintly, her eyes never leaving the dragon's. She could feel the warmth of its attention, the gentle vibration of its breath, and the intelligence in its gaze. And in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The dragon was no longer just a legend of terror. It was a living being capable of connection, capable of recognizing trust and responding to it. The council members could only watch, stunned and silent, as a small human child accomplished what generations of scholars, diplomats, and warriors had never dreamed possible. She had touched the heart of a dragon, even through a wall of steel and energy shields, with nothing but curiosity, empathy, and gentle courage. ID 58325. Variant Standard. Content. The observation hall was completely silent. The usual hum of machinery and low chatter of delegates, replaced by a heavy, almost reverent stillness. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the dragon and this little girl. What had been expected to be a tense demonstration of power had transformed into a scene of quiet wonder. The dragon, massive and legendary, no longer radiated the raw, destructive energy everyone had anticipated. Instead, it was calm, attentive, and focused entirely on the tiny human before it. The little girl, standing on her tiptoes, kept her hand lightly pressed against the reinforced barrier, and in her eyes shone a quiet confidence that she had not spoken a word to anyone but the dragon. And the council members whispered among themselves, unable to fully comprehend what they were witnessing. Some questioned the readings on their devices, thinking there must be an error. The dragon's heart rate, its breathing, and even subtle muscular tension indicated calm rather than agitation. Experts who had studied the creature for decades were flabbergasted. They had spent years preparing for an uncontrollable beast, yet here it was, completely calm in the presence of a single human child. The little girl had not used force, threat, or magic. She had not demanded attention or displayed power. She had, and that was enough to command the dragon's focus and trust. And the dragon moved slightly, its massive head lowering even further toward the little girl's hand. It let out a soft exhale, a subtle vibration that resonated through the floor and up into the delegate's legs. The energy shields flickered slightly with the intensity of the creature's aura, but the dragon remained careful, aware of the barrier and the humans beyond it. The little girl did not flinch. She could feel the warmth, the intelligence, and the attention in the dragon's presence. She whispered softly, "You can trust me. I won't hurt you." Her words carried no command, no expectation. They were simply a quiet promise offered freely. And something extraordinary was happening. The council, who had prepared for fear and destruction, began to react not with caution, but with astonishment. Delegates leaned forward on the platforms, trying to comprehend the subtle changes in the dragon's behavior. Scientists recorded every detail, analyzing data that would later rewrite centuries of knowledge about these creatures. Warriors and ambassadors, trained to understand threats and read aggression, watched in disbelief. The dragon, feared for its deadly capabilities, had allowed itself to be calmed, its attention drawn to something that carried no threat. And that something was a small human child, unarmed, unprotected, and yet profoundly present. And the little girl noticed every detail, the faint twitch of its massive ears, the ripple of its scales, the way its eyes glimmered with curiosity rather than hostility. She noticed the way it seemed to tilt its head, matching her gaze, as if acknowledging her presence. Every subtle movement reassured her. Every gentle exhale confirmed that her intentions were understood. She whispered again, softly, "I just want to see you, to know you." And her parents, standing a few steps behind, were speechless. They had expected fear, chaos, and perhaps panic. They had expected to need to restrain their daughter at any moment. Instead, they found themselves witnessing a miracle of patience and understanding unfold. The father's hand went instinctively to his daughter's shoulder, squeezing lightly, but he did not pull her back. He could feel the bond forming, fragile yet undeniable, and he understood that stepping in could disrupt something far greater than danger. Her mother's eyes were wide with pride and awe. She whispered to herself, "She's doing something no one else could." And the dragon's eyes, enormous and intelligent, followed every subtle movement of the little girl. It lowered its massive snout slightly, almost touching the reinforced barrier. Sparks flickered faintly from the shield, harmless but illuminating the contours of its face, highlighting its scales, ridges, and the faint scars of battles long past. The little girl leaned forward slightly, her hand steady, and the dragon exhaled gently. The sound was soft but resonant, a vibration that filled the hall and seemed to calm even the most anxious delegates. It was a sound of trust, of acknowledgement, of attention focused entirely on her presence. And for the first time, the council realized that this was not just a dragon responding to proximity. It was responding to something far deeper: empathy, patience, and the quiet courage of a human child. Discussions erupted quietly among the delegates, though no one dared speak loudly. Could it be that a human, with nothing but presence and gentle attention, could influence the behavior of one of the most feared creatures in the galaxy? Could innocence truly bridge the gap between worlds, between species, and even between legend and reality? Then the little girl whispered again, almost as if speaking directly into the dragon's mind. "You're not alone. I see you." The dragon's massive head lowered further, its nostrils brushing the barrier ever so slightly, the vibration of its exhale pressing softly against the little girl's hand. The council members could not believe what they were witnessing. No amount of study, training, or preparation could have predicted that the child would evoke this response. The dragon's legendary fury and destructiveness, the qualities that had made it a subject of fear for centuries, seemed tempered, replaced by calm attentiveness and curiosity. The 9 minutes passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. The little girl remained calm, focused entirely on the dragon, while the council members, scientists, and technicians observed every detail. Every flicker of the dragon's scales, every subtle movement of its massive limbs, every exhale was analyzed and recorded. Yet, in the quiet between breaths and movements, the true lesson became clear. Power and fear are not always the strongest forces. Sometimes trust, patience, and the courage to approach without threat can achieve what strength alone cannot. And her parents whispered quietly, sharing their astonishment. "I've never seen anything like this," the father said, his voice low. "No one could have expected this." "And she's connecting with it," the mother replied softly. "She's reaching it in a way no one else could." The little girl felt the warmth of the dragon's attention, the subtle pressure of its gaze, and the vibration of its gentle exhale. She felt that it was responding not out of fear, obedience, or calculation, but out of understanding. She smiled faintly, her small hand resting firmly on the barrier, and whispered once more, "I'm your friend." And the dragon's eyes glimmered faintly, reflecting light from the hall, and its massive head lowered slightly, closer to the little girl. Its exhale shifted into a soft, rhythmic rumble, resonating through the hall in a way that seemed to calm everyone present. Delegates leaned forward, scientists scribbled notes, and technicians monitored readings that they could barely explain. The council members, who had expected a demonstration of destruction, now witnessed a demonstration of connection, understanding, and empathy, all initiated by a human child's courage and gentle attention. And the little girl's parents watched, their hearts swelling with pride and awe. They could see that something extraordinary was happening. Their daughter, small and unassuming, had achieved what no protocol, strategy, or training could. She had reached the heart of the dragon. And in that moment, everyone present understood that the event unfolding before them was no ordinary demonstration. It was a lesson in the power of innocence, trust, and the human capacity to connect across worlds. ID 58326, Variant Standard. Content: the observation hall was still, filled with a quiet awe that replaced the nervous tension from earlier. Delegates, scientists, and council members stared, unable to believe what was unfolding. The dragon, legendary for its strength and feared across the galaxy, was no longer the terrifying presence everyone had anticipated. Its massive head remained lowered, its eyes focused entirely on the little girl. There was a gentle hum in its exhale, vibrating softly through the floor, a sound that carried a strange peace and calm. The little girl, standing with her small hand pressed lightly against the reinforced barrier, did not flinch. Her gaze met the dragon's enormous, intelligent eyes, and in that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them, and the council members whispered among themselves, their voices low and filled with amazement. Some questioned their own senses, certain that no one human could have this effect on such a creature. Scientists frantically recorded every detail, noting subtle changes in breathing, muscular tension, and eye movement. All their previous knowledge about dragons had suggested aggression, uncontrollable power, and fear. Yet here was something no manual or study could have predicted. Connection. The little girl, with nothing but innocence, patience, and gentle attention, had touched the heart of the legendary beast. And, unslowly, as if testing trust, the dragon lowered its massive snout closer to the little girl. Its nostrils flared gently, brushing against the barrier just above where her hand rested. Sparks flickered softly from the containment shields, harmless but illuminating the dragon's features, the glint of its scales, the ridges along its snout, and the faint scars that told stories of battles long past. The little girl's eyes widened slightly, but she did not pull back. She whispered softly, "I'm not afraid. I just want to be your friend." And the dragon responded in its own subtle way. It exhaled slowly, a low rhythmic rumble that filled the hall. The vibration resonated in a way that could be felt, not just heard. Delegates gasped quietly, some instinctively stepping back, but others leaned forward, captivated by the extraordinary scene. The dragon's eyes remained locked on the little girl, intelligent and curious, and it shifted slightly, lowering its head even closer. It was a movement of trust, deliberate and careful, as if acknowledging that the child posed no threat and offered only kindness. And the little girl smiled faintly. She could feel the warmth of its attention, the careful, measured awareness in Naizen. Every movement. She whispered again, softly, "You don't have to be alone. I see you." And for the first time in decades, the dragon's posture relaxed entirely. Its massive body, which had radiated tension and power, seemed to ease, and its tail, once rigid, rested calmly on the reinforced floor. Its wings, folded tightly against its back, shifted slightly in a gesture that could only be read as acceptance. Everyone in the hall was stunned. A creature that had destroyed fleets, burned planets, and instilled fear across galaxies had chosen to respond to a human child's presence with trust and calm. Then the little girl's parents watched, speechless. They had arrived expecting a formal observation, a meeting of diplomacy, and the display of a legendary dragon's might. Instead, they saw something no one could have planned for or expected. Their daughter had achieved what no council, diplomat, or warrior could. She had connected with the dragon. The father whispered softly to the mother, She's done something incredible." And the mother nodded, her eyes wide with awe. "It's more than incredible. It's pure connection. She's touched it in a way no one else could." The council members, too, were beginning to understand. They watched silently as the dragon's massive head lowered further, its eyes never leaving the little girl. A subtle vibration of the exhale, a gentle tilt of the head, and a slight lift of its wings signaled something extraordinary. Trust. The creature, feared for generations, was responding to kindness rather than force. It had allowed the child to approach it, to observe it, to connect in a way that transcended fear, power, and species. And encouraged by the dragon's calm response, the little girl leaned slightly forward. Her small hand pressed gently against the barrier, directly opposite the dragon's snout. She could feel the warmth of its exhale, the subtle vibration of its presence, and the immense intelligence in its gaze. She whispered softly, "I just want to be your friend, that's all." The dragon tilted its head slightly, as if acknowledging her words. The rumble in its throat deepened just a little, a soft, steady vibration that felt almost like a heartbeat. Delegates who had come to witness power and destruction now observed a miracle of patience and empathy. Scientists scribbled notes furiously, unable to capture fully the essence of what they were seeing. The dragon, once feared for its aggression, was calm, responsive, and focused entirely on a child's presence. Its immense eyes followed her movements, and its massive body, once a symbol of destruction, now radiated understanding and trust. And minutes passed like hours, but the little girl remained calm. She did not move away, nor did she push closer. She simply allowed herself to exist fully in the moment, present and attentive. The dragon responded in kind, lowering its head further, exhaling softly, and adjusting its massive body to mirror the child's calm presence. It was a silent dialogue, a wordless communication built on empathy, patience, and mutual recognition, and her parents could hardly believe their eyes. "I've never seen anything like this," her father whispered, almost to himself. "I know," her mother replied softly, her voice full of emotion. "She's doing what no one else could, showing the dragon kindness, and it's listening." And the council, too, began to absorb the magnitude of the moment. They realized that centuries of fear, strategies of containment, and legends of destruction had overlooked a simple truth: even the deadliest creatures could respond to gentleness and trust. And here, in this massive observation hall, a human child had demonstrated this truth in the most extraordinary way. None. The dragon lowered its head completely to the barrier, close enough that the little girl could feel the warmth of its breath. She extended her hand carefully, still pressed lightly against the barrier, and whispered, "I see you. You're not alone." The dragon's eyes, immense and glowing, met hers fully. Its massive body exhaled a gentle vibration, steady and rhythmic, a sound of acknowledgement and acceptance. It was a trust that had never been offered before, a moment of connection that bridged worlds and species. And the little girl's smile widened faintly. She could sense the dragon's awareness, its recognition of her intentions, and the silent communication between them. It was as if they understood each other without words, an understanding built entirely on presence, attention, and trust. Delegates leaned forward, technicians recorded every detail, and the council watched in stunned silence. This was not a demonstration of fear or destruction. This was a demonstration of what humans could achieve with empathy, courage, and innocence. The dragon shifted slightly, lowering its massive snout until it was nearly touching the child's hand, separated only by the protective barrier. It exhaled gently, and the subtle warmth reached the little girl's fingers. She whispered one final time, softly and clearly, "I'm your friend. You don't have to be afraid." The dragon's massive eyes blinked slowly, an unmistakable gesture of acknowledgement. It had accepted her presence, her intention, and her trust, and the room remained quiet, filled with a sense of awe and disbelief. Delegates, council members, and scientists watched as a bond had formed that no one could have predicted. A legendary dragon, feared across galaxies, had responded to the presence of a small human child with trust, calm, and recognition. The child had accomplished what generations of experts, diplomats, and warriors had never imagined possible. She had touched the heart of a dragon. Nay, our parents looked at each other, their hearts full of pride and wonder. They had come expecting a formal meeting and a display of legendary power, but they had witnessed something far greater, a demonstration of the human capacity to connect, to empathize, and to trust. The little girl's gentle courage and patient presence had changed everything in that observation hall. And in that moment, the dragon exhaled once more, a steady, rhythmic vibration that seemed to fill the entire space with calm and understanding. The little girl pressed her hand lightly against the barrier, feeling the warmth, the intelligence, and the trust emanating from the massive creature before her. She smiled softly, whispering one last time, "You're not alone. I see you." And for the first time in its long legendary life, the dragon seemed to understand that it was not feared for what it was, but seen for what it truly could be, a living, thinking, feeling creature capable of connection and trust, even across worlds. And the Galactic Council had come expecting awe, power, and fear. Instead, they witnessed an extraordinary moment of empathy, patience, and trust, all brought forth by the courage and innocence of a human child. And as the dragon remained calm, attentive, and trusting, the entire assembly understood a truth that would echo across the galaxy. Kindness and understanding can reach where force and fear never could.